Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode, another Tuesday night, actually, for a couple of our friends you'll hear from in just a second, to another episode of Show and Tell Generative AI with AWS. I'm your host, Trevor Spires, and today I've got three amazing guests ready to talk about one amazing AgentCore service. Antonio, Satvir, Faith, thanks for joining on. We'll go around the horn and do intros here in just a second. But first, for those folks who are joining us in the chat, let us know where you're dialing in from today. I'm coming at you from the great state of Maine. But one thing we love is that we have folks from all over the place dial into these sessions. So let's kick it off with you, Faye. Could we get a quick intro and let folks know where you're coming at us from today?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Jeff. So my name is Fei Yuan, and I'm a principal engineer in AWS, been with Amazon for close to 10 years. And so I am the lead engineer of AgentCore Identity service. And this is a service that was launched in July at the New York Summit. And this is one of the major launch of the AgentCore. And AgentCore has a bunch of services, and for the identity part, I'm the lead engineer. So working with the team, design, implementation, all etc.
Love it, Faye. Thanks so much for joining. It sounds like we got all the folks we need to answer everyone's questions today. Satvir, how about you?
Hi, Trev. Hey, Faye. Thanks for the intro. My name is Satvir. I'm part of the Bedrock GTM team, which is the go-to-market team. I focus on Bedrock security, Bedrock AgentCore Identity, working with Faye and Antonio, the cool folks here, and also on AgentCore security. I've been with AWS for around 6.5 years, and yeah, I've been working with all the experts here, working on all things AgentCore. Nice to see you all.
Love to hear it. And you've got a fan in the chat already, Daryl, who apparently caught up with you both at yes. Toronto Summit. So
yep.
Love to see that we're building that AgentCore community.
Good to see you here, Daryl.
Yep.
Awesome. We got some folks from Washington, D.C. What about you, Antonio? And tell the folks what time it is where you're at, just so they can be grateful for the hard work you're doing right now.
Absolutely. So yeah, for me it's right now midnight, right? So it's actually 12:30. So yeah, this is how exciting it is to talk about identity. I cannot think of a better plan for this time.
The man can't sleep. It's all he can think about is AgentCore.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure our customers are thinking about this definitely. But yeah, well, I'm Antonio. I work as a principal solutions architect in the same team as Satvir in the Amazon Bedrock go-to-market. I've been with Amazon for a bit more than 7 years now, and yeah, I'm based in Madrid in Spain, so that's why it's this time for me. So yeah, happy to be here.
Love it. Really excited to have you all. Such an important topic in the world of, if you haven't heard, everybody, agentic applications, that's kind of like the thing that's powering all the change that's going on in our customers and in customer experiences that you're probably dealing with day to day. And so I work in financial services. So anything related to identity and security, being able to log, being able to enforce some fine-grained access control is really key to my customers. So Faye, I'd love to open it up to you to kind of just maybe help set the context here of what exactly is AgentCore Identity.
Of course. So I will get this started from my side. So the first thing so the story kind of rolled back into the beginning of the year. And I think most of you probably know that Amazon has a Bedrock, and Bedrock has been very successful providing an environment to run models. And then it has this framework to write some agents and etc. You can do a bunch of things there, which is great. And then at the beginning of the year, we start to think about customers are expanding, right? The agents, customer using agents is an area that gains a lot of traction and growing fast. And then we start seeing the problem that how do we provide the best, for example, development and production environment for agent developers? And that kind of translates into a few areas. For example, there are many frameworks that came into the picture and gaining traction, such as LangGraph, LangChain, CrewAI, and a lot of the developers that start using different ones. And in addition to, for example, what Bedrock offered before, MCP obviously is another one that enables tools for agents to rapidly gain traction to talk different tools. And then another one is that well, people want to run agents, and where do they run it? Do they run it on the desktop local environment? Maybe that's good to start, as you have some kind of VS Code or cursor. You can kind of run some local agents there. But if you need an agent to be there to serve production traffic, then where do you run it? What's the environment? Do you need some kind of isolation, security? How long the session can last? So that's another practical problem of bringing the agent into production. And then the third one, of course, which is the main topic that I'll expand further with Xavier, Antonio, and Chap today, is that how do you secure agent? And what does it mean by the agents? How is it different from workload? We kind of had a lot of debates and internally as well that what's the difference between agent and workload? Are they the same thing? Are they different things? And so here where the security, identity, access control matters. Last one, this is where a lot of security engineers or CISOs and a governance body from different enterprise customers, they wonder, where do I see what's the agent doing? Because agent is so powerful, I want to be able to know what they're doing, what tools they're accessing, and etc. So there's a lot of these challenges that customers think about. I want to adopt agent. However, I'm also afraid to adopt agent because before I'm able to get an answer to this, it's really hard for me to move forward.
And I just have to plus one this because, like, you know, one thing that a trend that I've seen with AI and particularly agents is, like, when a customer scales an agent, like, it can go from like a prototype of an MVP to like scaled to millions of customers overnight. And it's something that I haven't really seen as much, you know, since the early days of kind of like the internet and the cloud. And I think a lot of customers get caught with like a project that maybe catches a nerve inside of their company, and they don't have a lot of these basics, these primitives in place. So when I saw the keynote presentation on this at New York Summit, I was giddy. I was like, finally, we've got these. Well, actually, I won't take away your thunder, Faye. You go ahead. What's the solution to these problems, Faye?
Yeah. So hang in there. We'll get to a solution, but really soon.
Okay. I'll let you have it.
Okay. So zooming into the identity problem is where now we go into a little bit deeper and also slightly more structured on. Here's how we think about the problems with agent identities. So first of all, you have a few parties here. Maybe think about this diagram that you have a user, you have an application, you have agent, you have resources, right? That's the most simplest form. And sometimes customers come to us that I'm just thinking about agent. No, there's a lot more. There's an application accessing agent, there's a user in front of application, and then agent access resources. So you start from that kind of a structure and then think about, how do I allow authenticate users accessing my agent? So that's probably the first question. What's your inbound authentication authorization? This auth here means both, not just about authorization, but also authenticating. Who is this user? Is this user allowed to call this agent? How is this user represented when they call the agent? So that's the first area of problems that we think about that customer needs to face and solve. And then before we get to the right side, you can see probably there's a blue box here under the agent. Who is this agent? And this is something that's interesting, which is where for this part it's very close to a workload. Because if you have a traditional service, when you build two microservices that talk to each other, usually customers or developers don't really care about what that service is. They give some kind of a trusted connection, permanent connection that, oh, my service is authorized to call the other one. And then eventually all the traffic just flows because you trust them. However, in the agent's case, agent is a machine, it's an application, that's right. The difference is that agent is kind of hard to predict because there's a model that agent uses. So then you really need to identify, you need to have some kind of stable identifier of who is the agent. And that's the second challenge that customers have. Where do we find it? Do we assign or who should be assigning it? And how do we know that's the agent who's calling me? And then on the right side is now agent needs to access resources. So from the agentic AI's point of view, one of the most unique part of agentic AI is that what makes the agent powerful is that agent can access resources, right? Agent can access resources, filling more knowledge to give a better answer or run or connect to real world API to perform actions. So that's the key. And then usually customers ask us about, how do you think about this? And our answer is just starting from your resources, because you are protecting, first of all, the most important thing for the agent is to protect your resources, because that's where agents access. So then on this right side is about, I'm a resource owner. Look, this is a different persona now. I'm a resource owner. I'm not an agent developer, but what I care about is that who is the agent that's accessing me, and on whose behalf is accessing me. I need to have this proof. And this proof, this information cannot be just that the agent code is telling me what it wants to tell me. This is kind of think about this, a little bit tricky, right? Because you don't trust the agent. As a resource owner, you want to know, agent's telling me who it is. I need to make sure that this is verifiable. Agent's telling me who the user is asking agent to work. For example, is Xavier asking me to do this job to access his account, or is Antonio doing that? And how do I know that agent is not lying to me? So that's where another challenge on the right side of the outbound is. So you see there's an inbound, who is calling the agent, who is the agent, and how is agent accessing the resource, and how does the resource owner knows? So those are kind of deeper questions about the challenge that we need to solve for the agent identity and access. There are many other questions or further down the line in the future, such as maybe multi-agent step, multi-agent chain, and there's much more additional advanced topics there. But this is the starting point about how do you think about identity and access for agents. Okay, so now kind of jump into solution a little bit. I do want to talk about the high-level components and the flow, and then I'll leave the rest of the session to Xavier and Antonio on running through some code. So I'll be brief here. The 4 components that we launched at New York Summit, AgentCore Identity, is that, as I explained in the previous diagram, how you think about the agent identity is that first we have an inbound authorizer. So we offer inbound authorizer that connect to your IDP, your identity provider, directly. And this directly, we made a lot of effort there, because we could have asked customer that you have to use one of our identity provider. Ours means AWS identity providers, such as you could use Cognito, Identity Center, and you need to configure with that. That's one way to do that. We didn't choose that way. We wanted to make sure that you can bring your identity provider as is with AgentCore. Means you don't need additional setup. You don't need to set up federation. You just say that here's my identity provider, here's access token issues. I want to treat this agent as a application, as a resource that in my original setup can connect to. We do give you Cognito, Identity Center as identity provider if you want to use it with it, but that's not a coupled with the system. So that's the inbound authorizer. We also give you authorization that you can control what's in my token, what's the user's claim in order for me to access the agent. And then the second part is about, by the way, by all means, we would love you to use Cognito. It's a very stable service. We have a lot of investment there. The scale, security, operation is probably not top notch out there. But we just want to make sure that we meet where customers are. If you use Cognito, you can connect to it. You use Entra, Okta, or Azure. You just connect to as is.
Yes, this is one of my favorite parts of the AgentCore launches in general. Is we really seem to be taking a very open kind of tool, not just model agnostic approach, but integration agnostic approach across the board. And so I think it's very exciting to see that we support not just Amazon services, but some of the most popular authentication partners that we have here out on the marketplace. So very cool.
Yeah. And in fact, we do a lot of testing. We test the popular ones out there, and we do a lot of testing, making sure that it works end to end. So invest a lot of efforts. And for those of you who develop services like this, you probably would know that just claiming that you support these is not enough. You need to actually test them. And then there's a lot of nuances among OAuth. So OAuth is a standard, but however, different identity provider, different applications will interpret different ways. So there's a lot of nuances there. And if you see some of the ones, if it doesn't work, of course, you can always contact our team, and we'll do our best to making sure that it works for all the popular ones out there. And then the second component here is about the identity directory. So here we look at we evaluate different choices. How do we assign identity to your agent? And at the beginning, we started with a role, IAM role, which works fine for many customers. However, many other customers use IAM role as a permission setting or permission boundary. and they could be sharing the same role across different applications or different agents. So this kind of makes it hard for us to force customer that you have to create one unique IAM role per agent. And that's the reason why we started with create a new resource, AWS resource called Workload Identity. And this resource is identifier that you can use it in policy, in configuration, in permissions. And that is a stable identifier for the agent. And we're going to probably talk about in the future on how we think about to link that. If you already have a workload identity somewhere, and we always think about mapping that, linking that. So it's somewhere that's more of a hub and spoke kind of pattern to link that. So that's the second one. And then the third one is about outbound authorizer. And this is where agents need to grab resources, interact with, for example, your OAuth application. You can have enterprise OAuth application inside your perimeter. You can also have external ones, such as maybe Gmail or Salesforce or any service out there. And the thing here is that if you're just writing a regular application, integrate with one or two such resources, you can trust the developer to do a good job. They can maybe stand up some kind of page, orchestrate user going through that, and then they will manage or store these type of outbound access token by themselves. However, in the case of agent, this gets it's much trickier, because as we said that, how do we trust the agent? Because agents, it's using some LLM models and there's unpredictability there. So that's the reason why, because of that, and also because your agent to be powerful, you need to access many other resources. So from both the developer experience, making it simpler for developers, and also reducing some of the security concern or security risk there, where we will help you to grab those outbound access credentials such as OAuth token, API key, and only give that to your agent code when your agent is able to prove who it is and who is a user that comes from the identity provider there. So there's a security model there that's not just as simple as, I just want to integrate with Gmail. It's not that simple, because the entire flow about inbound, who is agent, that will become the key in order for us to give that kind of token back to your agent to use. So that's our outbound authorizer. And the last one is observability. Those are standard things that AWS always offers. It gives you Cloud Shell, so you can see who invokes what and things like that. So those are four main blocks of the identities. Now, plugging this back into the Bedrock AgentCore services, it's a collection of services. So I'm not going to go into those services in detail, but this tells you where it fits. So AgentCore Identity itself is an independent service, has its own APIs. You can use it on its own to when your agent runs here or runs somewhere. You can use it to help you to get the outbound authorizer. You can use its identity in order to apply your policies and things like that. So it's a service there. It is also integrated with Runtime and Gateway. So Runtime is another service under Bedrock, which closely works with identity, that if you're using Runtime to host your agent code or host your gateway code, then Runtime automatically use that the AgentCore Identity's authorization as the inbound. And then for Runtime, for your code running in the AgentCore Runtime to access some resources outside, it uses AgentCore Identity's outbound authorizer. And same thing to do with Gateway. So when you use Runtime to host your agent, it automatically uses AgentCore Identity for the inbound and outbound, and the same vice versa for the gateway. And you can also use AgentCore Identity by itself. There are other components such as browser, code interpreter. Those are the first party. Those are the tools that you can use. And the memory as well. We kind of talked about when you deploy the agent running somewhere, where do you store the context of the agent interaction with user, short-term memory, long-term memory. So those are also additional components that you can use from the collection of suite in a Bedrock in order to productionize your agents. Okay, so this slide, I'll go a little bit deeper on the interaction sequence on how user goes through applications, through agents, through your tools. So step by step. First of all, user needs to access application. And here we assume that user is coming from identity provider. You can use any identity provider out there. You can also, if your user is coming from if you have some internal authentication scheme to represent how a user logs into application, you can also do that too. Because when we implement this inbound authentication authorizer, we are not taking a strong opinion about what that token looks like. To us, it's a JWT token. Obviously, if you use identity provider, that JWT token will have some basic claims such as audience and issuer, so that we can validate that. But you can also use other type of JWT tokens if you have some custom schemes in your enterprise setup. We also support some other modes, such as you can pass a user ID, which we can talk about maybe at the end of the meeting. If you need to use that, that's another route for you to do. So user comes in, and the user presents identity token that's issued by customers, by your identity provider. That gets sent to the AgentCore. So in this case, we're assuming that you are hosting your agent with the AgentCore runtime. And I think maybe some of you already are aware the runtime essentially is a place where you add some annotation to existing Python code, your code, Python or some other language, and that code, by adding annotation, you containerize it and then deploy in AWS with AgentCore runtime as a serverless function. So that's the reason why runtime is acting as a service interaction or invocation endpoint for your agent. So once your user identity token gets reached to the AgentCore runtime, and then our authorizer will then pull from the AgentCore identity directory to know who is the agent itself, right? Because when an application is calling the agent, the application is not in a place to attest who is the agent. But when the agent is running, now you get an incoming request. It knows what it is by itself, because that's what runtime deploys the agent. Runtime know the ID of the agent. So then the authorizer, by combining the information about who is the user and who am I myself, then it will combine these to do some internal token exchange process to generate some access token. And this access token is internal to you. You'll be able to see the access token, but it's opaque to you, because that's the token that you will send it forward to the tools. So this token itself contains information about who is the agent, who is the user, and it's verifiable because it's coming from the directory, it's coming from your inbound identity provider, and then combine them into there. Then your agent code, when you write your agent code, you'll be asking, oh, I need to access someone's OAuth application resource or or that user's Gmail account. At that point, then there's a couple of ways you can do that. Or I just maybe just expand that. Or one way is that if this resources is OAuth controlled or API key controlled, and then you could be using the credential provider or outbound auth. We have a token vault that your agent can interact. And essentially, you're just telling the token vault that here's my proof of who I am as agent, and here's a proof of who my user is calling me, and please help me to orchestrate a retrieval of accessing some resource out there, OAuth resource out there. And then our outbound auth will give you a URL for your agent to send it back to the application, prompt the user, maybe open a window or something like that. And the user will interact with the resources on the right side directly. But once that's done, then the access token is now stored with us, with AWS. And that token we store it in a way that only if you can prove who you are and the user, and then you can get that token back. So this is how we're removing the need for your agent code to manage those outbound access token for yourself, because your agent code could be managing, there could be hundreds of thousands users using your agent, and then it's really challenging for you to trust that your agent's code will be handling those tokens properly. So that's the reason why we have this service. And if you have a resource that needs to go to AWS resources such as IAM control, AWS IAM is the identity access for AWS resources. And then you can use the role of the AgentCore service itself, AgentCore runtime itself, or the gateway. Those are roles that you assigned when you set up that agent runtime or agent gateway. So this is the overall picture of how those components work together, and how do we give you the inbound agent identity, and how we tie that to the outbound. And that's how we see you can use this kind of component to stitch your full end-to-end application from inbound all the way to the outbound.
Wow, this is really cool to see it drawn end-to-end like this. This is the first time I've seen the full kind of end-to-end story of how we can pass the auth through for different for different patterns. I think we had a few questions while you're presenting. I want to bring up here, and I think in general it'd be really cool to just kind of double click on this a little bit more throughout the rest of the session. Somebody asked a question that I'd be curious to get your opinion on, Faye, is like, is this kind of like a zero trust model for agents? My initial instinct was like zero trust is a loaded term, but if you're going to do zero trust, you may as well do it early in the process rather than in a brownfield environment. And a follow-up question to that was if this is supported in Spanish. I'm going to guess you could build a Spanish agent, right? A lot of the models that you orchestrate support different languages than English, but I suspect our APIs are probably mostly as you would expect from Amazon.
That's
but
right.
Yeah,
definitely. Those are good questions. First of all, this is not, so we have an opinion on how you piece these things together, interface. However, we are not opinionated on what models you want to use, agent frameworks you want to use. So you can definitely use different models in Spanish and different frameworks as you want. You can see that this is a container or this somewhere that run your stuff and help you. The second one is about zero trust. Yes, Trev, you said perfectly. Zero trust is a loaded term. But however, that's also how we think about these problems, that we don't trust this hop from hop to hop. Every hop you need to show us proof in order for you to access resources. Okay. So I'm gonna turn it over to Savi and Antonio. There's a lot of demos that you can play, and then I can answer a question at the end.
Amazing. Thank you for the setup there, Savi. Really excited to see what you got cooking.
Absolutely.
For us.
Thank you so much, Faye. I mean, that was very in-depth, and it's a great refresher anytime to hear that. So thanks, Trev, for getting my screen share up. I hope, folks, you can see my screen. So you saw Faye spoke to you and talked to you about inbound auth and outbound auth. So I've got an example here. And all the examples that you see on my screen, they are in our Bedrock AgentCore samples. This is a public repo. I'm using an example for GitHub. And the use case, if you see this design diagram, we are deploying an agent that can access your GitHub repo and list maybe your private repositories as an example. If there are any other things that you would think of using GitHub, you can definitely do that. If you see the user is authenticating with Cognito in my example, the reason we chose Cognito, of course, it's a great service, but from a lab perspective, for a demo, it's easy for me to spin up Cognito. But if you want to use any identity provider, as we mentioned, we are meeting customers where they are. I mean, you can use any popular OAuth-based identity provider. We have examples step-by-step, for example, for Entra ID here. So these are already in the repo. These are screenshot-based step-by-step examples for Entra. We've got similar examples for Okta. So you can set all of these up. But going back to my demo, I'm using Cognito today. And so the user, so I've already configured Cognito. In this particular case, I'll walk you through some of the steps that will set up Cognito, configure the app in the Cognito. And I also have a small utility that will help me get the auth token or a bearer token from Cognito so that I can use it as part of testing my agent. One more thing that I have in my agent is we are trying to interact with GitHub. Now, GitHub is a resource that is protected by its own auth server. And Faye walked us through the concept of resource credential providers. So if I navigate to the AgentCore console and I'm on the identity tab, I can create some of these either from the console or I can even use the API. And if you see, we have a few name providers provided out of the box, and this list will grow as the service grows. So one thing is I can just select GitHub and provide the client ID, client secret. But today we will see how to do that using the APIs. And we are using a small Bedrock model for inference. So the agent, as part of our demo, will interact with GitHub, get a list of all the repositories or any of the prompt that we want to send, summarize it using this. So here is my notebook. And this is the same notebook that is already in the samples repo. We start by deploying some of the prerequisites, all the required libraries. And then I set up just the environment with, I would say, the dependencies for the utilities. In the utilities, all I have is a few helpers that will help provision a cognitor user pool and all the other parameters that I need. So the first thing is provisioning and setting up cognitor user pool. If you see, I'm emitting out the pool ID, the discovery URL, and of course a bearer token. This bearer token is something that I would be using when I'm testing the flow. The next thing that I have here is configuring the resource credential provider. So if I scroll back slowly, we spoke about this resource credential provider, and I also showed this to you from my screen. So here we are provisioning a resource credential provider. So what I've done is I've already configured all the settings for GitHub. And if you may be wondering, how do I configure GitHub? Here are all these steps. So all the steps to configure GitHub is already here. That is, log into GitHub, go to the developer settings and all of this. In the interest of time, I've already configured that. And because you might not be interested in seeing my client ID and client secret in this video recording, I have already stored that in a secrets manager secret following security best practices. And then here's a small code snippet where I'm creating the credential provider. So if you see, the provider vendor name is GitHub OAuth2, which means it's a name provider. And I'm just passing the client ID and client secret. So once that's done, you can see that visible here. So it's the GitHub provider, September 16th, which is here. And the next step that I'm doing is deploying my agent itself. Now, a brief walkthrough of the agent, starting bottoms up. And you may have seen a demo of how you deploy agents and runtime in the previous sessions. So we start with an entry point decorated by the entry point. I have the agent code itself. I'm using a Sonnet model, as I mentioned. It's using a tool which is called inspect GitHub repos, and a system prompt which is clearly giving it the focus message stating that, hey, you're a GitHub assistant, and you can use the tool to provide responses based on the use case. So that's how it is. Interesting note, I have a small helper function here which says need token 3LO async. If you see, this is decorated with resource requires access token and a few parameters, very important. The name of the provider, this is the one that I provisioned the previous step. So if I go back slowly scrolling up, if you see, this is the name that I created for my credential provider. It's called GitHub provider September 16th, and that's what I'm using there. And then the scope. Now I'm just giving this permissions only to read from my GitHub repository. The auth flow is user federation, which is the auth code flow or three-legged auth flow. In case this would be a mission-to-mission flow, I would use M2M here. And then I have a callback function on auth URL where I will receive the access token. And then scrolling up, I have some more utility functions for the agent to kind of authenticate, get the access token, and finally walking you through the tool itself. The tool itself is inspect GitHub repos. As you see, it's just iterating GitHub after it has the access token to list the repositories. So all of this is public. You can explore this offline. It's all in the form of Jupyter notebook, so it's easy for you to kind of step through it. And the next thing that I'm doing here is configuring the runtime. One point to note is we are auto-creating the execution role following security best practices, which means when you use the setting, the IAM role that's getting provision for AgentCore Runtime is following security best practices, and it's only having the minimum permissions required to run runtime itself. But in our use case, we are also creating, we are interacting with GitHub, so we are using credential provider. So what I'm doing in the next step is I first launch, which is deploying this on runtime. And if you see, this is behind the scenes, deploying, packaging my container, pushing it to runtime. Once all of that is done, I can add additional permissions to my auto-created IAM role. And the permissions that I'm adding are to read the resource credential provider to access it, anything to do with secrets, all of those permissions.
I got a quick question for you here, Severe. Yep. Something I saw. First of all, if it's possible in the notebook, if you could zoom in a little bit, it might help folks be able to see the code. But one thing I noticed, if you scroll up a little bit here, like some of the stuff that you're doing in the setup, this looks like AgentCore helper. Is this? Could you just explain what this is, and maybe is this something that we should expect to see in Boto 3, or is it like in a future iteration, or is this like a separate tool just to bootstrap some things?
Is your question around the auto creation execution?
No, I'm just asking. I see us importing from Bedrock AgentCore Starter Toolkit. That's it. That seems like a unique SDK. Is this just to actually deploy the actual AgentCore components? Is that what that?
Yeah, the Starter Toolkit is an SDK that allows developers to quickly set up, develop, test agents locally, as well as quickly deploy them with a good feedback cycle to runtime. Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay.
So you would be able to execute all of this in your terminal. And in the interest, and I assume when we had the runtime session, Shreyas did walk through all of this step by step. It's the same thing. So that's what we're using here.
Cool.
Navigating, after I add the permissions, I'm just checking if the agent is up and running. It's in ready state. And then here comes the time where we are invoking the agent. So first thing is I'm getting a fresh bearer token from Cognito so that I can pass it when I'm making a call to the agent. And here's the bearer token that's part of my call. And the question, the prompt is, what are my private repositories? And if you see, it's invoking based the agent with the bearer token that was provided. And the very first thing that comes out from the outbound auth perspective that Faye was walking us through is the consent URL. So as part of the three-legged auth flow, GitHub requires this user consent, and I have to copy this URL and open it up in a browser tab, provide the user consent. Once the user consent is provided, the credential provider is able to get the access token from GitHub in this particular case, and then continue listing my repositories. So I have a small Streamlit app here. Let me try running this to see if we can test this out. So I'll click the Streamlit repo. All right, let's look at what our credentials are. It is this one. Okay, so this is the inbound auth where I authenticated with Cognito. And now I can test this, a few things like tell me a joke, just to see if the agent is up and running. And it should prompt me that, okay, I don't know if this is a generic agent. It's an agent very specifically configured with a prompt for GitHub. In this particular case, I got throttled. But if you see the example here, once I authorize this particular call, I would definitely complete the consent flow and then list all the repositories. So I can try this again just to see if I'm getting throttled again. Let's see this. So I'm running the agent invocation again. Okay, I get the consent URL, so let me copy this, paste it in a new tab. Okay, the authorization is successful. I go back to my demo. And if you see, the demo should continue from here. So the credential provider is able to complete the user consent flow, continue getting the access token from GitHub, and there you go. So it is able to list all the private repositories from my GitHub. So very simple demo. And this similar concept applies with any resources that are protected by OAuth. Customers may have, for example, GraphQL APIs or any other APIs that are protected by OAuth. This could be, they may be using Okta or any other leading OAuth-based IDPs, and the same concept works. One thing I want to point out here is, besides the name providers that you see here, we also provide a custom provider. So if you don't see anything that you want here, and this list will grow, by the way, you can always create a custom provider, provide the manual configuration, and provide all of these details, which are basically all the configuration you need for an OAuth server. And that is all you need. And you can interact with any resource that is outside of AWS using OAuth. So that's my first demo. Antonio, checking with you if you want me to continue with the second one, or do you want to switch to Gateway?
No, go ahead with the second one. I think it will be interesting to see, because one thing that we commonly hear from our customers, and we were discussing before this session, was, okay, we seem to be associating all the time AgentCore Identity with the runtime. But what happens when you want to use it as standalone, right? So many customers are asking, how do I use it standalone? Because I maybe have my agent hosted in my own EKS or ECS in AWS, or even you are using it anywhere else in any compute that you might have. So can I use any AgentCore Identity anyway? So if you can walk through that example, I think that would be valuable.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And this is a common question. So the whole gist of AgentCore is you can use any of these primitives or services either on their own or together, which also means that you can only use AgentCore Identity if you want to. For example, as Antonio was mentioning and Faye also alluded to it, you could be running your agent on-premises or on a different AWS service or maybe even a different cloud for that sake. And you want your agent to interact with AWS services and you want to use AgentCore Identity. There's a way to do it. So I have this repo here. Again, this is all public. It's the Starter Toolkit. And on Starter Toolkit, I am in the Identity section, Quick Start. And we'll share this links. This is all public information. So in this example, it's a small application, agent application, where it's doing some research. As part of the research, we are using Perplexity API to run a small research for us and then store the end result in a Google Drive. I mean, very simple use case. Intentionally, we have just picked a couple of combinations so we can show you the use of API key, because the token vault, as Faye was mentioning, it allows you to store different types of secrets. One is API key, and then access tokens for both the two-legged and three-legged workflows. And in this example, we are showing both, like API key as well as access tokens. So we start with the prerequisites, basically setting up your Python environment, configuring AWS, so you have enough AWS permissions. And the very first thing is we are installing the SDK. And Trevor, you were asking me some time back, this is the SDK AgentCore Identity Quick Start, and just setting up the Python environment, activating it, and we are good to go. The very first thing we need is creating a workload identity. So if an agent is running outside of runtime or gateway, and it needs an identity, we can use the identity client libraries as part of AgentCore Identity to create a workload identity. And the API call here is create workload identity. I'm just giving my agent a name, and this creates a workload identity. So I can print out the ARN, I can print out the agent name. So this is the first piece. And second piece is configuring the resource credential provider. If you saw my previous example, I was walking you through configuring the credential provider for GitHub. In this particular case, it's just for Google, just a different name provider. The concept is the same. I'm just providing my client ID, client secret. And if you want to see instructions of how to configure Google itself, we have all those instructions in our demo. So if I go back to AgentCore Identity, the 3LO example, and this is an end-to-end example of how you can use Google. In fact, so here are the steps of configuring Google on behalf of the user flow. The next step is I'm also configuring my API key provider. In this particular case, as I mentioned, I'm using Perplexity. So I definitely need an API key. I will get that, replace this, and configure the credential provider for API key for Perplexity. And then here is a simple research agent. The code is very simple, starting with a class research agent. What this is doing is interacting with Perplexity. And then I have another function to save the results to Google Drive. So if you see, we are starting off with providing a prompt to say, okay, the search query is research comprehensive information about a particular topic, and then the agent will interact with Perplexity, get those results, and each of these functions, they are getting those access tokens from the resource token vault. They're using the workload identity, as we mentioned, and getting all the information and storing it to Google Drive. You can locally test it by running a small HTTP server. Here are all the steps to test it. So it's a very simple flow where you can use the AgentCore identity features even if the agent is outside of AgentCore. If your agent is running in AgentCore Runtime or Gateway as part of tools, then you don't have to worry about getting the workload access token. All that is done implicitly done for you. So those are the two demos that I had. Just mentioning that all of this is available on our samples repo. We are continuing to enhance and add more and more examples to the repo. One thing that you will see more of is examples with all the leading IDPs. So we've already covered Entra ID. We have covered Okta. We are adding examples for Auth0, Ping Federate, Cisco Duo, to name a few. If you have any identity providers that you want to see in this particular listing, do let us know via chat. And if you also want to see any other target OAuth servers, for example, I was mentioning that we have these connectors. If you want to see any more that you don't see on the list, do let us know what is the ones that you most commonly use. So with that, I would definitely like to hand it over to Antonio for some more
Wow,
updates.
I'm excited. We've got time for a bonus demo, everybody. If you didn't know, we weren't sure if we were going to have time to fit in this last demo. So we got a bonus demo, and I think it involves Gateway, which is that service is. I'm really excited to see kind of how exactly that plays with the identity solution that we've been talking about. So let us know what you got for us here, Antonio.
Yeah, definitely. So let's use those last minutes for that. So let's recap, right? So I think that the first demo was about, okay, we have an agent in AgentCore Runtime, and we want to add inbound and outbound identity here for accessing that agent, and then for when this agent is accessing our GitHub tool, in this case for inspecting the repos. In the second demo, what we saw is, okay, can we use AgentCore Identity as a standalone? So you have any kind of piece of compute that you're using, and now we have two tools here. So we have Perplexity for doing some search, Google Drive for storing, and now we want to identity to deal with all the auth that is happening there for those tools and so on. But then the question is, okay, can we also do this with AgentCore Gateway? And AgentCore Gateway, as you probably saw in the last session, is a very interesting part of AgentCore today, because it allows us to somehow simplify, if you want, functions that we already have. So that can be a Lambda function that you're using in AWS. It can be, in general, any API that you have compatible with Open API or a SMITI format, right? So AgentCore Identity, as Faye was saying at the beginning, is also built into the AgentCore Gateway. So we can deal with the inbound auth also using auth, or we can use we can also deal with the outbound auth in this case. So the demo that we are going to show here in this case is targeting a Lambda, and in that case we are going to be using an IAM role for let's say dealing with that auth in the outbound. But bear in mind that that's not the only option, right? So in general, these are the options that you have available when you are using identity in the gateway. So if you are going to an external service, so let's say that you are again going to Jira, ServiceNow, GitHub, Salesforce, whatever you're using as a third-party service here, or even if you have any tools in your organization that you want to control through OAuth, you can do that as well. And it also supports API keys in the case that you are accessing, as we saw before with the Perplexity tool, resources that require API keys as well. And that's like the whole ecosystem and options that you have. But again, let's dive into in this particular case into a Lambda function that we think is a good example for getting started in this case. So I hope you can see my code here. Hope that is big enough. So first of all, what we are doing here is creating a Lambda function, right? So again, I did the magic of the kitchen here, and I already have a Lambda function created for us here. But this Lambda function is just a dummy function that I have for simulating that we have some order management in this case, right? So I have a few tools inside that allow us to give a status on an order ID that we're going to be asking for, and so on and so forth. But at the end, I think the important part here is that we all see how, again, the auth is being enforced for calling that Lambda function, and in general for using the gateway also in the inbound. So first thing that we do here is create the role that we are going to be using in our AgentCore Gateway. Again, this is an execution role that we are going to be needing for that element to be able to write the logs to CloudWatch to execute what it's doing, and so on and so forth. And the next step that we are doing here, as you see, is that actually we are setting up the inbound auth. And in this case, I'm creating, again, a user pool incognito. We are using Cognito for flexibility. It's easy for us to set it up. But again, you can extend this example to any kind of identity provider that you might be using today, including the most common ones like Entra ID, former Active Directory, or Okta, or anybody else. In this case, I have my user pool created. I have my client ID. I have my discovery URL, and so on and so forth. And then I'm ready for creating my gateway. And in this case, as you see, one very important piece that I'm passing in my configuration is something that is called the authorizer configuration for the gateway, right? So this gateway is going to get this parameter that says, okay, I'm going to use a JWT token in this case that is going to go against this discovery URL, and is going to allow these clients to invoke, let's say, this gateway, or to use the gateway for listing and invoking the tools that it had behind. So this is how we set up the inbound. It's very easy, very similar to how we do it also for the runtime. And once I set it up, you should be able to see it in the console, by the way. So if you go to the AgentCore console, you should be able to go here to your gateways, and you should have your gateway, in this case, highlighting what is the method that you're using for the inbound identity. In this case, it's showing me that I have Cognito as my identity provider. And the next step that we have to do here is now set up the targets for that gateway. So we have the gateway element. We have to now configure what are the tools that this gateway is going to have behind. So what I do is that basically I'm setting up the schema, the NCP configuration, let's say the NCP JSON schema here for my tool, in this case for my Lambda function, right? So I'm pointing here to my Lambda function ARN, to this dummy function for working with orders. I'm passing some details on what is this tool doing exactly, a description, what are the parameters that this tool is accepting, and so on and so forth. And one important part is the credential config that I have for this tool, right? So in this case, I'm specifying a gateway IAM role. And this will be the place where you actually would change to whatever configuration you might want to use in your tool. Let's say that in example, instead of using Lambda, as we said before, you're using something else like, I don't know, Sendex in example. We have an example for Sendex in the repository that was shared before by the team. And in this case, in the case of Sendex, you can also configure here with your Sendex client ID, your secret, and who are the authorizer exactly that you're going to be using, who is the issuer, and so on and so forth. So any parameter in general that is supported in your OAuth configuration by your resource credential provider, in this case by the external tool authorizer that we are going to be using. So again, coming back to our Lambda, I'm passing my gateway IAM role parameter here, and all I do is that I plug this into my target configuration, and I create my gateway target. So here I'm effectively attaching, let's say, my Lambda to the AgentCore Gateway. So in other words, we are NCPifying that Lambda function, and we make it already with the outbound auth that we need for being able to call it only for users that are allowed to call this tool, or allowed to call this Lambda function in this case. And the rest is, well, pretty much setting it up so we can use it. And maybe if the demo gods help me, we can test it out live and see how it goes. The first step that I'm going to do is to request an order access token, so that I can call in the inbound this gateway, and I can go with it. I got my token. I have my URL for my gateway there, and I'm going to locally test with a dummy agent here. As you see, all I'm doing is setting up through an NCP client. I'm setting up my streamable HTTP client, pointing to my gateway. I'm passing my token again as the authorization mechanism for invoking this gateway. And then I'm specifying that I'm going to be using an agent with Amazon Nova Pro, in example, and I'm pretty much exposing the tools that are behind this gateway as the tools that this agent is going to have accessible, right? So here the key parameter is that I'm syncing the tools that are in the gateway so that the agent is able to discover this when it's being invoked. And that's it. I'm passing here a prompt that is saying, in example, check the order status for order ID 123 and show me the exact response from the tool, and so on. And if, again, the demo gods help me, in this case, what we should be able to see is that the agent is thinking, and he says, okay, I need to list all the tools available. And then it says, I see the tools available are get order, update order. Awesome, because we saw that it's actually reading from our Lambda. So it means that it was able to get to the Lambda. And now it's using the tool one it was able to invoke it. So it means that our outbound auth also work. And then in this case, it's saying that the order 123 is in chip status, which is really the result that we wanted from that Lambda function. So amazing. We did the inbound, we did the outbound, and now we have a secure pattern here for calling NCP tools with the gateway. And the last step would be, hey, I want to put all of this together. So I want to go from AgentCore Runtime to AgentCore Gateway and have identity dealing with all the process. Well, it's pretty much the same code that Satvir was showing us before. Probably the only part that you will have to modify here in this code is specifically adding this gateway part. So creating this NCP client pointing to the gateway with the proper authorization, passing the token that is needed, and so on and so forth. The rest is pretty much the same code that we had in the runtime before. And again, you can do it as part of the same agent process, or you can do it as a split processes if you want to, do a multi-agentic setup or something like that. So yeah, that's what we want to share on this.
Way to leave us on a high note. I think it really helps getting to visualize it kind of end to end like this. So, but by the way, can you all remind us where should folks go if they want to find their like let's say you've inspired some folks, they want to get started, they want to start experimenting with this. What's the best resource?
So if you can pull up my screen, Trev, I have a few links here.
Whoa, you came prepared with the QR codes. There you go.
So yeah, I mean, the GitHub examples that I was showing you, it's a one-shop stop. We've got multiple types of examples, not only primitive or specific examples. For example, there are examples only for runtime, only for gateway, identity, but we also have end-to-end getting started. You start with a simple agent on your laptop. You add memory to it. You enable inbound auth using AgentCore Identity. You add outbound auth, maybe interacting with GitHub or any other provider. Also examples of how you can access AWS resources. And you can do all of this end-to-end. So we've got all of these examples. We are active on Discord. So there is a question from the audience as to, hey, how can we discuss these with you? Please post your questions, join Discord. One of us will, respond and happy to answer or unblock whatever use cases you may have. So the GitHub examples continuously updated. Please watch that idea. If you have a use case for which you don't see me covering an example, use Discord and let us know that, hey, we would like to have examples for so-and-so identity provider, or maybe these type of external resources that are not on AWS. Talk to us about the different kinds of challenges or different use cases that you're working on. So, of course, the product detail page and documentation links are always there. As the service continues to evolve, you will continuously see updates in these spaces. Yeah.
Amazing, guys. It's been so awesome having the three of you on. To Faye's point, we're DMing internally. This is a very comprehensive session. Oops. Comprehensive session instead of demo, so I can't say thanks enough. I think keep an eye out for more from the AgentCore and Bedrock team. I think we just had New York Summit, but it feels like tomorrow we're going to be at reInvent, and I'm sure there's some brand new goodies coming our way. So again, thanks again for the time, gentlemen. Hope to have you on again sometime. And for those folks who joined us for the session, this will be posted on YouTube right now after I pressed end. So take care, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you all for your time. I mean, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you, Antonio, Frey, and Trev, as always. Thank you so much.
Of course, guys.